Yes, welcome to TV Metro Mail. You are watching Chit Chat, and I am Imamul Haque. As a part of our observance of United Nations World Interfaith Harmony Week, we invited a number of guests today on our show to discuss about interfaith issues, to talk about harmony and multiculturalism. Our guests are from different faiths, but they have a very strong passion for serving the community, serving the humankind. So I'm not only excited today, I'm very much honored to have my special guests today. Viewers, let me first introduce my guests. I can see we have Shaykh Yusuf Badat. He is the main Imam and Director of Religious Affairs at the Islamic Foundation of Toronto. We have Reverend Brian McIntosh. He is a minister, Bloordale United Church, Etobicoke, Ontario. And lastly, but not the least, we have Rabbi Michael Dolgin. He has been serving Temple Sinai congregation, Toronto, since 1992. So, welcome to our show. Thank you very much for your time today.
So pleasure to be here.
Okay, thank you very much. Frankly speaking, when I discuss something, with the religious leaders or the spiritual leaders like you guys, then I think that life is interesting. I feel that the world is beautiful. We always like to know certain things from the religious perspective. So my next question is there any particular quote that you like to, you consider sharing with us, which can give us, a very specific or special mantra, which will help us to live in a diverse community from your religious or belief the perspective?
Yeah, so I will quote one of the famous Islamic scholars who was once asked a question: if you can summarize your religion, what would it be? So he responded by saying, worship to the Almighty and service to the creation. So if we can all live by this, as you say, mantra, then I'm sure the world would be a much better place. So we worship the Almighty in our own ways, and what we feel is the best way to worship the Almighty and the Supreme Being. And while doing this, we are also in service to the creation, and creation includes the human beings, our environment, animals, all kinds of creations that we are surrounded by. And again, when we do these two things, service to the Almighty and service to the creation around us, I'm sure we will find peace and harmony increasing, and we will find the bonds establishing, and we will find ourselves coming closer to one another.
Thank you. Reverend Brian, do you like to quote something which will help us to, live a life in a multicultural environment?
I always come back to that love of God and neighbor quote from Jesus. It seems to summarize just so well. So I'm not going to add a whole lot to this conversation. I'm not one who tends to carry around a bunch of quotes in my mind. But having said that, I do think that the Good Samaritan story as well, the parable of Jesus about one who, when Jesus was asked, and who is my neighbor, he said the one in need. And I think that the addressing, and he told the parable of the Samaritan who was beaten up on the side of the road and left half dead. And it was a stranger, not a religious leader, but a stranger who came by and bandaged him up and took him to find healing and took care of him and showed compassion to him. And that's, to me, a fantastic parable that tells us that our neighbor is the one in need, not just the one we live beside in the house next door, but the neighbor is the one in need in our community. And it seems to me that's the kind of neighbor love that we need to cultivate among our people.
Thank you very much, Brian. Rabbi Michael?
Thank you to my colleagues for those beautiful statements. I would add, as far as introducing the Jewish tradition in this regard, that there's a very famous disagreement between two of our sages from 2 millennia ago, Rabbi Akiva and Ben Azai, about what is the central principle of Judaism. Rabbi Akiva at the time suggests that loving one's fellow community member, not just the general community, but one who's part of your particular faith and community, that's what's essential. And Ben Azai suggested that no, it goes back to chapter 5 of the book of Genesis, where it reaffirms after an opening difficulty and violence that we find in the opening parts of our Torah, of the Bible. It reaffirms that all human beings, regardless of their shape or form or gender, all are created in the image of God. And so, first of all, that Judaism, like many other faiths, affirms the importance of machloket l'shem shamayim, of disagreement for the sake of heaven. The goal is not to get all of us to agree, but rather for all of us to respect and participate in respectful and meaningful disagreement. And to do so within our own communities. I think a lot of conflict that exists between communities is in fact a reflection of the disagreements within our particular communities. And so if we treat one another better within our communities, we'll be better positioned to love all of our neighbors, not just the ones who are part of our particular group. When we do that, it then gives us the chance to balance these two hands, to live a more full life, proud to be a member of a particular faith or community or ethnic group, and at the same time to reach beyond it to those who are created in the divine image, as we all are, and who then we can share with and learn from.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rabbi Michael. Have you ever experienced any kind of misreporting about your religion or your practice in media? And if you have some kind of experience, we like to know the example. And in that respect, do you have any specific suggestion or advice for media? Brian, do you think that media sometimes misreport your practice or religion?
Well, yes. I mean, media tends to want to entertain. And when they entertain, they tend to want to simplify. And when they simplify, they tend to characterize religious leaders, for instance, and depict religious leaders in very narrow ways. They don't have character development for, religious leaders much in television shows, for instance, because they perform a particular function in that television show or whatever, whether conservative or liberal, it doesn't really matter. They're not shown as complex characters like we all are. I tend to think that media, you kind of get what you're looking for. If you pay attention to the leaders over time that are depicted in various media, including this one, you can glean whatever wisdom you can from these depictions and portraits, but you can't really look at media for in-depth learning or something like that, about your own religion or another religion, frankly, because if they're caricaturing your religion on a television show, you can know full well that they're caricaturing another religion in that same show or in another show. So, it's somewhat superficial, but it can be, it can point towards certain truths in some of these depictions.
And at the same time, they have their own limitations as well.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you. Right. So, Imam Yusuf, do you like to add on something?
Yeah, for sure. I echo the sentiments of our Reverend. The media's job is to terrify, and they only want sensational news And here's a good piece of news right here. 3 faith leaders of various faiths coming together talking about harmony. This will never hit the media. Even if it does, it's at a small corner or at a small commercial. But if there's a story about 2 faith leaders opposing one another, or not wanting to work together, that will be on front news. So the media, their job is to terrify and to sensationalize. And yes, I'm sure all of you would agree with me. Islamophobia is on the rise. The parliament just made a declaration here on the 20th.
I was going to mention that.
Yes, on the anniversary of the Quebec mosque shooting, which is one of the largest or the greatest terrorist actions that ever took place on this land that we call Canada. Many a times, the media depicts religions, not only Islam, but other religions as well, in a very inappropriate manner, which results in causing disharmony, disunity, and misunderstanding. And right now I'm just informally dressed because I'm at home with my kids and my family. But when I go to the mosque for my formal worship and to lead the prayers, then I'm in my garb and I wear a robe and I tie a turban. And I've seen people remark, I was filling up at a gas station and people say, hey, there's Osama bin Laden, there's the terrorist, right? So, I smile back and I tell them that's actually not true. But these are things that I think what we were talking about earlier will negate all of this type of wrongful media or portrayal, is our understanding of one another. So, for example, if the media comes to me and talks to me about something negative about Christianity, I'm going to say, hey, hold it there. I know Reverend Brian. I know Rabbi Michael. These are people of religion, and their religions don't, promote that at all, or whatever you're trying to, depict a picture of negativity. So the more, as I said, that we understand one another, the more we can, our voices and our actions will be much louder than these negative voices that are out there. So it's definitely an issue. It's a problem. But as Reverend also said, if we want to learn religion, we're not going to learn it from CNN and Fox News. We're going to learn it from the true sources, which is the actual leaders of the religion and also their source text. I always say this when I do interfaith events or when we have the schools that come over. Prior to COVID-19, we have the high schools coming to our relative places of worship. I tell them, look, to understand any religion, you need 2 things. Number 1 is you need the right source, and number 2 is you need the right context. So if I want to learn Christianity, I'm not going to learn it from the news or the media. I'm going to go to the church or the place of worship of Reverend Brian McIntosh. And if I want to learn Judaism, I'm going to, give a call to our dear rabbi here, Michael Dolgin, and learn it from him. So we have to have the right source. And then the context. If I take a snippet of a verse of the Bible or a verse of the Torah, and I don't understand the background story and what happened with Jesus or what happened with Moses there, I can have a distorted image and an understanding. So 2 things are very important, the source and the context. And the media generally doesn't look at these 2 things. They don't look at the source and they don't look at the context. It's snippets, and they channel it. The journalist or the reporter channels it to whatever he or she wants to depict. So it is an issue, but I think as we work together and we know one another and understand one another, we can challenge this sort of difficulty that is out there with the media.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Imam Yusuf. Rabbi Michael, I am sure that you like to add something more with this. And at the same time, I would also like to ask you that if you just give us some kind of advice, if you have, for media.
Certainly, I really appreciate what both of my colleagues said. I very much echo what Imam Yusuf said. They say in journalism, if it bleeds, it leads. And the truth is, they're always looking for something more sensational, more fear-creating. But specifically around religion, I'll share a funny thing that happened when I was participating in a multi-faith conference. They had faith leaders from 8 different traditions here in this region of Ontario, and they handed me my badge when I got there, and it said, "Mike, representing Judaism." And the entire usefulness of that name tag was I took a picture of it and sent it to my mother. But I don't represent Judaism. Some days I get up when I speak at conferences and say, I represent every rabbi standing in front of this microphone. There's a lot of difference within our faiths, and we, the 3 of us, are very responsible speakers. The reason I mention that is because what the media does is when they find that extreme individual that they need for the story, they'll say so-and-so, a rabbi or an imam or a reverend, when in fact they chose that person because that person is a violent fundamentalist who come from no tradition and every tradition.
Right.
But by labeling it, they create in the mind of the reader an association between the two that is more about the person they chose than having anything to do with the tradition that person claims to represent. And so I think the advice I would give to people in reading the media is, as hard as it is to try to be aware of the unspoken assumptions of articles. And also, I would invite people to ignore the headlines when they're reading media and read the stories. Because I did learn in learning about how journalism works that the people who write the stories and the people who write the headlines are not the same people.
Yeah, different people. That's
And
Right.
the purpose of the articles is to inform, and the purpose of the headlines is to attract attention. And many of us only read the headlines. And so all we get is the misguided advertising. And so I would advise people to look and read stories and not worry so much about the headlines, which often are completely inaccurate. And just to be aware that this is a business and that people's goal is not to be objective generally in creating stories. It's to have an agenda. That could be a wonderful and loving agenda. Or a completely negative and also material agenda, or can be described in any other way. So we should be aware that when we choose our media, we're choosing a certain perspective, and that's only one of many perspectives.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rabbi Michael. Now let us talk about Canada, because we live in a multicultural environment, diverse. We say that diversity is our strength. Definitely, we believe in that. So, despite all these things, we have some limitations. We have some, unfortunate things happening in our country as well. To make Canada a more participatory, more just, or multicultural environment, we need to put a lot of efforts from different, sides. So, how our religious leaders can contribute to these efforts so that we really have a multicultural environment in our country and just society, and which is very inclusive. So can I start with Reverend Brian?
Well, again, like multiculturalism is a fact of life in Canada, in Toronto especially. 130 or 40 or whatever the number is these days, nations represented and nationalities represented in Toronto alone. One of the most multicultural cities in the world, as was mentioned earlier. And I think that the word culture leads to kind of practices, human practices around food and language and worldview and understanding. And to be multicultural, one can hardly help but be multicultural in Toronto when you confront so many different kinds of people, whether it's on the subway or in your daily life or at the grocery store or wherever it might be. And as we've been saying all along, we have the choice every day to encourage our people in our faith communities to wake up with the opportunity to learn uppermost in our mind, and with the opportunity to respect. One of our faith statements within the United Church says to live with respect in creation. And that's a terribly important attribute to have in a multicultural society. Respect doesn't mean that you have to agree with everyone or everything that everyone says, but it does mean that you can you honor their freedom to say it, and you take what they say into your mind and heart and soul and discern the truth of it. And it also means that we can truly value each other's ways of expressing our own cultural values. I was going to answer the earlier question partly by saying that the effort at rooting out racism is really incumbent mostly on the dominant culture, and that means the white culture. So it's mostly incumbent upon myself and the dominant religion of the past 200 years, at least, if not many thousands of years, in the form of Christendom. I think Christians, in particular, have a lot of responsibility to foster respect for other people, because my other colleagues both find their life and identity and vocation in the midst of minority communities, whereas I'm in a majority community. So the majority needs to change, and the multiculturalism that we're going to value in the future is one that upholds and dignifies all minority cultures within the majority culture. So that's part of what I think when I hear the word multiculturalism.
Thank you, Reverend Brian. So, Imam Yusuf, what is your take on this?
Yeah, so your question about what faith leaders can do to establish and further the cause of multiculturalism. So I believe two things. Number one is, as leaders, we need to be seen doing things that would promote understanding with different cultures and the diversity that we have here in our beautiful country, Canada. So when my community, for example, my, as we say, my flock or my congregation, my audience, my followers, when they see me participating at an interfaith event that may be taking place at a mosque or a church or a synagogue or a temple, then that will give an understanding to my community members that, hey, this is something that we need to do. This is something that we need to participate in and we need to be part of. And the other thing is we all have platforms as faith leaders. We all have followers. We have dedicated followers that, listen to us week by week and in our teachings and in our Bible or Quran or Torah studies. We have students, we have our audience. So we need to leverage this platform that God has given all faith leaders to promote good topics and themes and subject matter, such as the multiculturalism and the diversity. I constantly tell my congregation, meet someone new every week, at least, if not every day. And that new person should be someone from a different culture, different background, different religion, even if it means just to, have a coffee with them. You don't have to talk about religion, but just get to know them. And that will be the beginning of so many good things to establish that community that we want of diversity and respect and love and harmony that we are speaking about here.
Thank you, Imam Yusuf. So, what is your take, Rabbi Michael, about this? That what role the religious leaders really can play to make Canada really inclusive or multicultural?
I certainly want to echo what my colleagues have said, but I want to say a little more about the way we use our pulpit, our voice, the way that the Imam has said. And I think that it's our responsibility in an interfaith reality and a multicultural context to know what pains our neighbors and to speak up about it, not only about our own parochial concerns. And I'll give you, to me, what's the most painful and clear example of this in our country at the moment. Now, I'm a naturalized Canadian and very proud to be Canadian and proud to live in this country. At the same time, I am embarrassed at the existence of the laicity law in Quebec, of what used to be called Bill 21, which wraps itself in the garb of secularism, is an anti-religious law, and let's speak clearly, its intent is clearly anti-Muslim, even though it does affect others. And so as that process was rolling out, I was speaking very clearly to my congregation, to leaders in my community, to political leaders around me, saying, I know we're in Ontario, we're not in Quebec, but we are in fact one country. And it is a gaping wound on the soul of our country that the second most populous province could have a Muslim and also more directly anti-Jewish, just less effect, anti-Jewish law on the books, and say that it's okay because it's popular in Quebec. The response of so many religious leaders of my community, and to me of every community, the response of political leaders has been inappropriate and inadequate, and we need to speak up when in the country in which we live, religion in general and Islam in particular is under attack. As Imam Yusuf said, this is a time where anti-Muslim hatred is on the rise, where anti-Semitism is on the rise. I think we need to speak up and speak out and not let go just because something has been passed into law, and make sure that we speak out on each other's behalf, not only on behalf of our own.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to have this kind of discussion. I hope that our viewers, those who are watching, you will get the gist of this discussion. Thank you very much for being with us. We are very close to the end of our program, but before we leave, I have two small things to check with you. One is what would make our country more inclusive for the newcomers, so that they feel welcome in this new country. Do you have any specific things that you like to highlight or mention? Let me start with Reverend Brian.
It's interesting you asked that, because part of the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Canada, as of 6 years ago now, is to change the citizenship oath for newcomers who come to Canada to include that this land that we share was originally the land of the indigenous peoples of the various regions of the country. And I think that's a positive initial teaching tool for newcomers to come to Canada to learn about multiculturalism, about the fact that we seek, at least in our public statements, we and hopefully in our hearts as well, we value the diversity that we know in cities like Toronto and in Canada as a whole, and that we want to honor difference. So I think that there's much that we can do. I think we all also have been involved in refugee sponsorships of people from other countries, and I've been, in particular, over many years, been involved in various refugee sponsorships of Syrians and from many other countries. And it seems to me that it's incumbent upon us when they arrive to ensure that they understand that they've entered a country where we value diversity, and different perspectives and worldviews should be valued. and we can work with those refugee populations as well, because they're usually pretty grateful to be arriving in Canada by the time that they do, and at the same time, they've been protected from the dangers that they faced in their own situations. And so this country has served them well already, just as they're arriving. And it seems to me that they have a predisposition to value the diversity that we espouse in Canada, as we do those sponsorships. So I think there's much to do about continuing to do police training, for instance, about mental health, and about how to deal with people of different perspectives than your own when you're on a call, or whether it's in our school system to continue to uphold children who are from various backgrounds and provide the opportunities that they want and deserve to meet their and achieve their dreams as they grow. So lots that we can do, and lots that we can feel called to by the Almighty One, that we share in common a faith toward. And I just want to thank, in closing, my colleagues for this wonderful discussion tonight, and thank you, Imam, for the opportunity again.
Thank you very much. So, Rabbi Michael, would like to hear from you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to my colleagues for spending this time. All of us certainly have been involved in many similar enterprises on behalf of new Canadians, on behalf of the principle of immigration. A reminder that all of us are, in one way, even if it's many generations back, immigrants to this land. And that it's essential to our biblical ethic to say that we need to know the heart of the slave and the stranger, because that's where our people started, and that's where all of us in some ways have roots. And so we must know the heart of the downtrodden and the disadvantaged. We tend to do so in bursts and then get re-enmeshed in our own everyday. So that's normal, and that's human behavior. And so I would just conclude by sharing one more saying from our tradition. From the 3rd century, from our oral tradition, that says, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, that on the one hand, that it is not your responsibility to complete the work. So the work of making Canada the amazing multicultural country that it is, and even that it can be, is not something that we will complete. It's not something, we can be frustrated because we do our work and find that the media and that other actors who don't share our values but may share our titles may seem to be undoing that which we are doing. It can be frustrating. So on the one hand, we need to speak up and know that we're not going to suddenly arrive in the promised land. And the second half of that saying, that just because you're not going to finish the work does not excuse you from doing it. That each of us needs to invest ourselves in the work of making our shared values the heritage of our community. And we have powerful shared values among these very different traditions that we represent. And I hope that we can continually remember that while we continue to learn and teach, that we regularly go back to basics and remind others of these truths, and have the courage and put the effort into our convictions, so that we might build on the incredible foundation that the society has, something even more harmonious and beautiful.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Michael. It's Imam Yusuf. So we like to know what we can do, particularly the people, those who are coming from a religious minority group. So how can we make sure or ensure that they are really welcomed in Canada?
Yeah, when it comes to our newcomers, first of all, we need to understand that all our traditions, our great, role models, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, all three of them were migrants. So we have to
Right.
honor the migrants. We have to honor the migrants. It's our duty. So there's two things. Number one is there's something that we all need to do as Canadians who are already established here, is we need to welcome the newcomers with open arms. And I've seen every community here doing that, whether it's at faith places or businesses, and even some of the politicians, they have sponsored some of the newcomers of recent in the last few years. So this is a great example of welcoming, bringing them in and welcoming them with open arms, supporting their transition from their difficult situations and their minority situations into Canada. So that's a great responsibility that we all have. We need to continue to do that and empower these newcomers with our support and our assistance. The other thing is there's a responsibility on the newcomers as well, that we are helping you and supporting you, but get involved and be amongst us and participate with us and learn how we live and learn how we are true Canadians despite our differences in religion. And this is what I've been talking to at the mosque when the newcomers were coming in from Syria, is that yes, you may have experienced challenging circumstances and you may have your own biases, etc. But Canada is a different landscape, and you need to see and experience this. And I took them to some of the interfaith events, and they were surprised. They said, "I've never been to a church. I've never been to a synagogue." And it's done here with so much love and respect, whereas back there, we dare walk into a church or we dare go into another place of worship. So there's a responsibility that we have as Canadians who are already established here, welcome and support them, but also remind the newcomers that there's a little bit of responsibility on you as well to be part of the diversity with love and care, and that will make our community stronger.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us and sharing your insight with us. If you do not have any last word, I would like to wrap it up here. Do you like to, any one of you? Do you have any last word?
I'll just say one statement of the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, peace and blessings upon him. He said, "Irham man fil ardi yarhamukum man fis sama," which basically means be kind and merciful to the people on this earth, and the Supreme that is above, he will be kind to you. I think if we all, establish this within our own communities and our own little congregations, we will see that peace and blessings. And as we started off with the topic of harmony. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Brian or Michael?
I'll just add from a less religious book in our tradition, Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs. It says, Azak hamavet ahava. One of the few things that's as strong as death is love. And that all of our traditions, with all of their different teachings, affirm the power of love. And that we need, even as we seek to differentiate ourselves and understand our neighbor, we need to bring love with us each and every day and use it as our primary lens to see ourselves and to see the other, so that we might build a society that is kind and understanding.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Reverend Brian?
Just to say, in this Interfaith Harmony Week, it seems appropriate to be able to wish a blessing to all the faith communities represented here, and not just on this show, but those beyond this panel. All our interfaith colleagues, leaders and people who use this week to perhaps, do things that they wouldn't normally do, and reach out to the other. And the more we do that this week, the more will be carried into the following week, and then do it on a consistent basis. So blessings to all our faith communities that practice what we've been trying to say a little bit tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time and insights. Viewers, thank you very much for being with us. In our next episode, we'll have different topics with new guests. Until then, please take care and stay well. Thank you.
Thank you.